Hello, hello, Kadena fam. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be tuning in from, and welcome back to Kadena Campfire. I'm Tyler. I'm the tech adoption lead here at Kadena Eco, and we have an amazing session for everyone today with some of the greatest hits of Kadena, if you will. We got some rock stars here. We're bringing back Abraham to the stage. We're bringing back Adam to the stage. Of course, they are with us from DNA, the database of native assets. And we are very fortunate to have our very own Sir Lensalot here with us today, Stuart Popejoy, the CEO of Kadena. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as usual, we will start off with a quick intro and some updates, and then we'll jump into some topics with some new news stories in which DNA has been featured. Surprise. And then we'll finally jump into a live Q&A. It'll include some questions that were pre-asked on Discord. But if you are here on the stream, please give us a hello. I see a Barbaric Puma. You get the first comment of the day award. Congratulations. Cloud. Really awesome to see people coming in. Kadena ecosystem, great to see you. So a lot of excitement here for today's session, and we'll definitely be following the comments. So please feel free to ask any questions, chime in with any thoughts in the chat. It always makes it really fun for us when it's as interactive as possible. So now on to the meat of things. Want to give a very quick update that, first of all, there are open positions at Kadena. Kadena is hiring. So if you want to peruse some of these cool positions, we will post the link down below here on Greenhouse. Definitely go check that out. Secondly, actually, that's the main update I wanted to give. So we're going to jump right into the news. That'll be even more fun. So there was a recent border e-trade, a cross-border e-trade transaction that some of you may have seen on Twitter. Now, this is pretty cool. I'll just read it out loud. Kadena grantee DNA Tech assisted world's first quantum secure cross-border e-trade transaction. The shipment was tracked in real time via IoT devices, with the info being minted by DNA onto an NFT using Kadena's blockchain. So maybe I can turn it over to Adam or Abraham to expand a little bit and tell us more about this milestone.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Stuart, for having us. And hello, Kadena fam. It's great to be back. So we just did this international cross trade. We were very, very fortunate at building on our last successes on the auctions with Sotheby's. We were approached by a consortium led by Arkit, which is a NASDAQ-listed company that does military-grade quantum encryption. They were working very closely with Imperial College in London with their AESE lab, which is Adaptive Emergent Systems Engineering. And there was a framework that was being built out by the ICC in the UK, the International Chamber of Commerce, in conjunction with the Singapore government's Infocom Media Development Authority, to look at digitizing trade and taking trade into the next generation for e-bill-latings and more secure trade flows. So it was the most challenging project that we've done so far, because usually when we're talking to a customer, they're pretty clear about what they want to do, and we offer the technology that we have. But in this case, we're working with a consortium, big companies, university with a lot of IP and talent. And the first bits of the work was really combing through hundreds and hundreds of pages of legal work and framework to fit into the piece of the puzzle. So the thing that we did is we digitized the goods. It was a shipment between Permavoid and JBL buildings in Singapore from Felixstowe in the UK. And we also connected our NFT to an Internet of Things sensors that was developed by Imperial College. And what this did was it also tracked the shipping conditions, so that when the recipient received the goods, they scanned the QR code on the goods. It validated the provenance of the goods, but also guaranteed that throughout the shipment, none of the conditions during the voyage compromised the goods. This was all done in real time through the sensors, which were sending the information into the token, which we then minted onto the blockchain.
pretty freaking sweet. So showing this use case of this sort of blurring of the physical and digital world, and showing how you can have this interface, and for there's some incentive for both the shipper and the receiver to interact in the blockchain. The shipper can sort of get this certification of good being transferred, that it was arrived, and the recipient can know the provenance of the goods, know that this is indeed the shipment, that they're supposed to get the right items. And so showcasing how you can sort of interface this physical world with records on the blockchain in a way that then creates this chain of custody that might ultimately protect or increase the value of something over time, as you see that log.
Yeah, and it was also good for us outside of like all the cool things that we were able to do, but it was also good for us to understand more how Kadena will help us in the future. For this project, we only minted one token, but that one token generated around 500 transactions just in the data that we were putting from the sensors there. And in the beginning, we had a backlog of transactions that were information that was already generated, and that we processed in about like 18 hours. We were very conscious about not using the whole block on each transaction, so we were putting together the transactions in a way that at least we use no more than half of the block size, and just putting together our architecture for batch processing. And yeah, it was a really good, interesting case that also laid the foundations for what we're going to be doing next. We are already iterating on this.
Super cool. So I want to get on to another topic, but I see that there's one question that's somewhat related to this news story, so I'll jump to it from Barry. He's wondering, IoT, any cooperation with Crank? For those that don't know, Crank, of course, is running a IoT network on Kadena that uses LoRa to do fairly long-range, low information transmission rate connectivity for IoT devices. So yeah, could you expand a little bit more on the IoT side of that, and any cooperation with Crank now or future?
So it's funny that this is brought up, because I mean, first of all, Crank is a very exciting project, and one that we've been following, and it's really groundbreaking stuff, right? So we have spoken to Peter in the past, and looked at cooperating. It was probably a bit too early stage for us at that point. This project wasn't even on the radar. However, once we got this done, we thought to ourselves, wouldn't it be great if we do something with Crank? So if Peter, you're watching, we're going to reach out at some point. It'd be great to do something with you. But yeah, I think it's extremely exciting. And when you look at the goods and how they'll go out into the world, and this exciting hardware aspect of that can give you real-time information, having that kind of network would be invaluable to mainstream it. So I think what Crank is doing is unbelievable, and definitely there is interest to looking at cooperations of sort.
Yeah, Barry, we definitely have Crank on the drawing board for the big picture.
Right on. So maybe I'll go to one other topic here. Would love to hear some insight into what it's been like to build on Kadena.
I mean, it's been quite a ride. It's been definitely a bumpy road. I won't lie about it. Not because Kadena is hard or anything. I mean, it's a blockchain, and blockchains aren't easy. So you have to account for a lot of things when you're building on it, if you want to build something that is solid. I love it. I wouldn't be building on any other blockchain at this point. And I hope to be building on Kadena for the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is that when we found Kadena, which was before Marmalade was even announced, so we took a long-term view. And Abraham had a lot of experience in the past building on ERC protocols, but Kadena solved a lot of the problems that he'd been trying to solve on ERC. So I think one thing I would say is that people who build on Kadena are probably those that pass the marshmallow test, because it's the guys who are taking a longer view, because the base technology is just the next generation and what blockchain should be. And that's why we started early, maybe a bit too early, given the Marmalade wasn't a thing yet. But we love what we're doing with Kadena, and I think even though it doesn't necessarily have the I guess the reputation that other blockchains have as far as the depth of the market, just because ERC protocols are so prevalent. I think that those that get whiff of it understand the power of it, and ultimately, it does help the marketing, because when we go to our customers and we can tell them, look, there's not going to be any issues with gas fees and the environmental impact is much lower. People are very receptive to that, right? So I think if you want to build on Kadena, you just have to have a longer term view, because it's definitely, and if you're building on blockchain, you should be anyway looking at the longer term view, because it's
permanent
too. Yeah, it's a long term commitment.
I love that you mentioned the marshmallow test. For those that aren't familiar, perhaps a crypto version of it would be if Satoshi Nakamoto in 2010 took a bunch of 8-year-olds and asked them if they'd rather have one marshmallow or one Bitcoin, and you got to pick and choose. So the idea of prioritizing short-term reward payoff versus long-term hodling or increase in marshmallow ROI. All right, I got one last topic for us, and then we'll jump into the more of the live Q&A. I'm very curious to hear about any future plans for DNA.
Well, look, we've been very lucky because of the caliber of projects that we've done. We started off with the Steve Olson project, which probably gave us more street cred than anything, being a skateboarding legend. Piggybacking off that, we got into the Sotheby's auction and did the first jewelry piece was backed by a certificate of authenticity NFT. And then we got into this project with Arcade and Imperial. So that's also opened a lot of doors. Douglas and I, who founded the company with Abraham, our background is in commodities. We always thought that this would be something that we would be doing later down the line, because luxury seemed to be the early adopters, but it seems that the whole world is moving in that direction. So we're in discussions with shipping companies and different actors in the trade cycle who are interested in integrating this kind of technology. And I think that this is potentially going to be a very big business line for us. We're also still working on our traditional commercial leads that we've been building over the last few years, and we're integrating our first customer that's properly going to be in the platform over the course of the summer, and that's going to help us get into what will be the first commercialized V1 version, which ultimately, compared to where our dev plan is probably now closer to what V2 or V3 would have been, just because of everything we learned on this particular project.
Yeah, that was something interesting during the participation of this pilot, was that we actually were able to channel more Douglas and Adam's experience in the commodity world, because they know it so well. And for me, it was more about learning what they had to say and implementing stuff that we probably would have been doing next year. And this gave us the opportunity to think about it and start laying the foundations for what it's going to be the next steps.
All right.
One thing I wanted to add too is one thing that just makes all this just so exciting for me is that some of these things were things that we were trying to make real before we even launched a public blockchain, and back when we were doing enterprise blockchain and coming out of JP Morgan in 2016 and 2017. One project we had was with a what was it? It was an energy. No, was it energy? It was crops, and it was basically dealing with consuming weather data in order to underwrite. I think it was a kind of swap or something that would basically, it's one of those kind of typical agriculture. You know how every financial product starts with agriculture somehow. It's one of these things where this particular instrument. It's like an option. Its price goes up or down depending on the average of the weather patterns in a particular region. So it was going to be IoT, it was going to be all these things. And we had a number of use cases in this place. And it was one of those things that like, there's a lot of moving parts, obviously, and that's one of the things that like, I find so fascinating. But one of the things we were able to say at the time is that, we've built this system to be able to handle industrial amounts of data. And that obviously informed how we launched Chainweb. The Kadena blockchain was designed to be able to scale to handle any data load, in the sense that like, a lot of times people think about scaling from the point of view of transactions per second. Like, if, with the Kadena blockchain as it is, if we were to go to 50 chains, that would be more than twice as many transactions per second. But arguably more important is the fact that we can store more data, that we can also like eventually we'll figure out how to separate the chains. Miners will figure out how to like manage chains independently. And you can actually scale data storage on a blockchain. But the point being is that like, there wasn't a use case that really, could benefit from, it being actually manageable to send in this kind of incremental data that you guys are sending in from your IoT devices. So, so this is something that we've been wanting to see happen, for almost, for like 6 or 7 years now. And we always knew was something you could do with the system. A question for you is like, how much has it helped you that you can do things like upgrade contracts in production and stuff like that?
God. You have no idea. That's one of the things that I loved. And I think I mentioned this when we met for the first time back in 2021. It's so easy. It's so easy. It's so elegant. And
so you've been actually able to upgrade with live data and like have use cases that are in production, and then you can roll out an upgrade.
It's inconsequential completely.
So this is something people got to remember about Pact, is that like, Pact saw what was wrong with EVM right from the start. It was very informed by EVM, and this was a huge one.
Well,
the idea that you couldn't upgrade, that you couldn't upgrade your smart contract. And in fact, an interesting thing about Pact's history is that that's where key sets comes from, is that originally comes from module governance, because like it was clear that if you were going to make a public key be responsible for updating the contract, well, you can't have that just be one key. Like that's ridiculous. No software development stack would accept that like, oh, you lose your key, you can't ever upgrade your software again. That's insane. So at a minimum, you need to be able to have more than one key. So a lot of
it's so versatile.
Core features comes from this one feature, which is you need to be able to upgrade your smart contract.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I was from time to time I think about it. I try to figure it out, like, and it's probably just a futile exercise, but I try to figure out how does it work in the background, because you can just upgrade the contract and you don't need to worry about the data, it was always an issue with smart contracts on Ethereum. And that's
you're going to a new address. Yeah,
exactly. So that's something that I was approaching from a different point of view on Ethereum. I just didn't have the time at that time to finalize my version. But what I was doing was using contracts as tables, basically having them only have one structure and only have them the getters and the setters in that contract, and making sure that the structure that I was designing, the table that I was designing effectively in that contract, was never going to change. That would allow then to have multiple contracts that will act as tables, independent tables, and then you will have your business logic on a different contract. And if you wanted to then upgrade that contract can change the business logic, but then you can still reference the data on something else. Now, obviously, I don't need to worry about any of that here on Kadena, and I that's one of the things that I love so many things about Kadena, to be honest. But that's something that I love, and I was thinking about when you're deploying a contract, then you have, so the tables are not defined inside the module. So I was trying to figure out, like, how are the tables? I think it depends, or it makes sense that because you set the namespace first, the table is basically in the context of the namespace, but then how there are no collisions with the table. So
Oh, because
There's-
so it's quite simple. I mean, yeah, it can seem mysterious, but the concept is quite simple, which is that packed in the end is actually a stored procedure language. It's not the tables are real tables, so like it's a bit of a fiction when you go to upgrade and you do def table, right? Because that table already exists. When
Exactly.
when you do an upgrade,
What I have
that's
is
actually why there's
a conditional.
that's why there is this function create table. That's why tables don't get created automatically for you. Like a lot of people probably struggle with this when they're learning Pack. They're like, wait, I just defined the table. Why do I have to go create the table afterwards?
Right.
And there's a very good reason for that, which is that because you can only do that once. When you're defining the table, you're actually kind of defining the concept of the table. You're saying that you're defining like a pointer to the table, and that's what the module works with, is the access to the table. When you go to create table is when you're actually making the physical record in the database. And so in that sense, it's just like any other database system,
And that's exactly how I see it. And I've talked about this with Adam a lot. Like my point with Kadena is that it's effectively a database, and I see smart contracts as stored procedures, basically.
Right, and that's
so I think for the folks in the audience that are a little more on the lay side of things, it's I think always illuminating to hear people talk about a little bit more of the underlying technology. And at the end of the day, when we think about a blockchain as being this ledger system and something that you can read and write information to, it's easy to imagine just a piece of paper. And how different could two pieces of paper be that I could write a message on? But at the end of the day, the real nitty gritty is that blockchain is this permissioned access that not anyone can edit another message that someone else wrote.
By the way, you can still do row level security on a database, but is that really secure? Like if you have a database administrator that can just do whatever they want on a regular database, you can do that on blockchain, and that's so powerful. That's what is really powerful about Kadena. It is a database on a blockchain.
But again, and what you're saying is that it's more secure than a traditional deployment. And that's actually, so this is another thing that this is a drum we've been beating since 2016 as well, is that, and then again, DNA is just really starting to show the actual promise of this, which is that people out there might not realize how revolutionary what DNA is doing. And the thing that's revolutionary about it is that they're using a public blockchain to make serious business and governmentally visible and regulated transactions happen. I don't think people fully realize how huge this is because, and this is something that has been part of our vision forever, but it's not for us to do, we need the DNAs of this world to make these use cases come to life because, we've got a platform to manage. Other people, the business part of this is incredibly complex. There's so many moving parts. You have governments, you have standards, you have devices, you have, and getting those people to use a public blockchain to do this implies a level of trust in the platform that is significant, right? Just think about it. It would be pretty, it means something that a government looks at something like the Kadena blockchain and says, yep, this is going to be around. This is a platform that because there's more to, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's more to permanence than just blockchain itself. There's also, what's in the chain's DNA, in terms of where are they coming from? And the thing is with Kadena, all along, we've been talking about things like this. We've been talking about, and just like you guys are saying, you're in it for the long haul from the point of view of thinking about design. Well, that's one of the reasons we believe in decentralization, is that we actually think that decentralization is important for the long haul, that you have to have a truly decentralized blockchain, that you have to have, all the things that make Kadena what it is something that means that it's also not a system that's designed for manipulation. It's actually a system that's designed for permanence, that governments, that big business can put their assets on there and know that they're not going to get messed with.
All right. I want to jump to some both live questions and also some questions I've been asked in Discord. I see Breaks has been very patiently waiting after asking a couple of great questions. So first one from Breaks: how does DNA Tech plan on using Kadena's multi-chain? So let's start with that one.
That's for you guys.
Abraham, I think this one's for you.
Well, one really good thing about Kadena is that from our point of view, being multi-chain, is that, and this is how I see it, I tend to use a lot of like analogies when I try to figure out how to use stuff. Kadena's multi-chain is just load balancing. If a chain is congested, you can just use another chain, right? And the way we're building our business is it doesn't matter where information goes into the chain as long as it goes into a chain. So for us, it's going to be crucial because we don't need to worry about, like right now we use Marmalade on chain 8, but in the future we will be using Marmalade on every other chain, whatever chain is free. So it's load balancing and definitely something that it has to be leveraged because it is in the foundation of what Kadena is.
Again, I think to add to the load balancing, it's also scalability, right? So if you want this technology to be everywhere, you need to be able to have no congestion and be able to do this, right? So like we stressed it a little bit with this token, and this token had a lot of input that was constantly flowing into the blockchain. And that's just one token. Once we scale this out, we will need to have the ability to do this at scale. And great thing about Kadena is that it's essentially infinitely scalable.
Yeah.
And then
and as it grows, it gets better use of the resources that are around. So it's just a win-win.
And then second question for Stuart, is there a minimum block time or blocks per second to run smart contracts? Is that why Kadena is a 30-second block time?
So that's an interesting question. There's a lot of pieces of it, but I'll try to go through them quickly. So the first piece is that one of the reasons why we're really excited about layer 2 is that layer 2 will be a chance to see kind of Pact Unleashed, because layer 2 doesn't have any of the roadblocks surrounding consensus, right? Layer 2 is the fastest of fast finality. And that's when we get back to the speeds that you see with like our Kuro private blockchain. And indeed, that's what Kuro is going to become, is layer 2 is really, Kuro is going away, layer 2 is the future. And layer 2 will be able to pick up, the performance gains of something like Kuro. And again, that's something where, in modern computing, modern computing is powered by concurrency. Like you can't, if you talk about computing and you're only talking about a single thread of execution, you're not talking about modern computing anymore. You're talking about ancient computing. And this is something that is actively harming layer 2 projects, not just layer 1, like, the Optimism and Arbitrum and all these other ones, is that, they're moving Geth to a layer 2. I mean, that's a cool story. It's definitely faster than Ethereum, still a single thread of execution. And remember, for a layer 2, it's like chains become threads, and then threads at that point, we don't have the same constraints on the size of the graph. We can just roll out a layer 2 with 1,000 threads if we need. Really, the transactions per second question gets kind of blown out of the water once you start talking about layer 2, because it's really, well, you need to tell me what you need. Like, it's no longer, oh, we can hit this. It's like, what do you need? And then because you can also build a purpose-built layer 2 if you want. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing, is that like the whole transactions per second, which is always a little funky anyways, as I'm sure you guys know, because like that's why we have something like gas, is that ultimately there is no one transaction. There are transactions that are very expensive. There are transactions that are very cheap. And one of the things we're always trying to do is refine how we calculate gas. So this is one of these things that happens in the background. But, Emily and team, this is something that they focus on relentlessly. It is improving how we compute gas so that we get more and more accurate over time. And, and so we really know what's going on. So that's another important thing, is that, gas continues to be an important mechanism for understanding. So it's really like gas per second, but nobody would know what that means. So like that's the second thing. The block time finally has to do with having a multi-chain consensus. So, focusing on 30 seconds is a bit short-sighted because, in fact, it's 3 seconds because that's the average block time across, or it's less than 3 seconds. It's 1.5 seconds because that's the average block time across
multi-chains, right?
Yeah, and I understand that that I think people still struggle with multi-chain and they think that oh, this is one of the things that makes Kadena complicated, but it's not. It's actually one of the things that as projects like DNA take on new use cases and enough to solve new problems, they're going to realize that at some point they're going to want to broadcast to maybe like 5 chains at the same time, and figure out how can we simultaneously use chains to increase our capacity even further. And at that point, you start being, and remember, it's throughput versus latency. And so, in the sense that that's how long it takes for an average block to come through. So that's what your latency is going to be. But so in terms of like reducing that time, that's not something that is really in the cards because what we can do, of course, and something that we work feverishly on is improve how transaction propagation through mempools, because that's what gives us the what's the word in statistics, the spread or whatever, the long tail that we get in terms of sometimes transactions taking too long. Is that so 30 seconds isn't the problem, a minute's the problem. Like that's where you send in a transaction and because of some problem and how it's propagating through the network. So that's something that networks like Ethereum have put thousands of hours into, and we're making huge investments in improving that so that like you can rely on the consistency of getting a transaction into the blockchain and plan around it. Because ultimately with blockchain, the big problem is not being able to plan what your performance is going to be, and that's why gas is such a problem in Ethereum. Is that like you don't know. You might have to pay this huge amount of gas.
Yeah, brute force it, so you make sure that it goes through fast.
All right, we have a question from, I think, Fudo from Discord. Is DNA using Marmalade V2? Are they inventing V2?
Uh-oh.
Inventing it? No, that's all Kadena. The team is amazing what they're doing with V2. We are not using it right now. We are looking into it. Obviously, it's still in the kit process. Yeah, we are going to go into V2. V2 is bringing in a lot of things that we like, that we love. We are not too keen on off-chain storage, but there is a point for that. But yeah, we have V2 on our plans in the future. We have to. We're putting together the plan of what we're going to do next, and V2 is very much in the short-term view of what we need to do, what we need to develop. So we have to migrate.
All right.
One thing I want to say about V2 that's very important too is that we're not. One of the things that I think was interesting in the V2 process was that there was an emphasis on off-chain storage, but the goal all along was to make on-chain storage policy-driven. And the reason why that's important is actually so that concrete schemas could be used for storage. Because right now you can't specify a schema. If you want to use an object inside of the old manifest, you can't give it a schema. So one of the real reasons why schema can't have a concrete policy is that that's one place where you really want to write your own policy so that you can write your own schema. Because once you plug in a policy, you can store exactly what you want in the database with a tight schema and go from there. So, I think some of the things that we want to work with DNA on is figure out how that informs the URI and stuff like that. Like we're going to be working on but one thing I want to say on the off-chain storage chip is that one of the reasons we went for off-chain storage, I mean, it's obviously, incrementally more efficient. A project like DNA isn't using a ton of storage in the ledger anyway. So this isn't about like a space problem. It's actually compatibility with ERC20 NFTs, because it is a very well-established standard to use, IPFS and these other JSON URI links, so that people can come to DNA and not people can come to Marmalade, and if they're coming from OpenSea or they're coming from these other things, they don't have to change how they're representing their NFT. They can just plop that right on Kadena, and one of the things you'll get out of that, and one of the things that is coming from Marmalade v2, is automatic support for GUI widgets. So the idea being that, like, if you have some of these advanced features, like you have a collection, or if you have a fixed quote policy or something like that, now a UI will be able to automatically tell and give you that experience in the front end. And so this is some of the things that are going to make Marmalade v2 like the absolute standard, because people will be able to come up from Ethereum, stuff will just work. People will be able to do things like DNA and craft a more sophisticated thing that will just work, and they'll all be able to live together.
Yeah, without having to be deploying thousands of copies of the same contract.
Right. That's the whole thing that's crazy about Ethereum, is that everybody's like, that's the other part of it being a stored procedure thing, is that, like, the code is here and the data is here. That's the big difference with Pact, is that you have some code knows how to write to the database. Now you can write a bunch of database stuff.
Yep.
It's just, it makes more sense. It's an old model. It's been around since the 70s.
Yeah, it's proven.
So I see we have a ton of questions in the chat that have piled up, as well as some pre-asked. So maybe, given the time constraint, I'll challenge our speakers to treat this next round like popcorn. Let's see how many we can get through here. So I have one related question here from Barry, which is, how much can you store on chain, or do you need something like Flux additionally?
I mean, this is one of the things we're working on with Gas, right? Is making it that we have that we understand the economics of storage. Right now, I think it's a bit underpriced. Not really. I think it's actually pretty good, and it informs our block limit and stuff like that. So this is why gas work is so important. There was a question someone was asking about the block limit. Like, we definitely have a conservative block limit right now, and but that's because gas has two jobs. It's got to both do compute and do storage. So we're actively working on these things to make it that. And in the future, one of the promises of ChainWeb was that eventually you'd have chains that are kind of designed for particular things. So right now, all the chains are completely homogeneous. But in the future, you could have, once we're running like 100 chains or 1,000 chains, you could have a neighborhood of chains that are charging less for storage. And the idea being that you kind of like the way Ethereum's going roll-up centric, we could have chains that are really focused on a particular kind of storage. And again, that's going to be working with partners. We're not going to be the ones making the call on that. It's going to be somebody who's got an idea about how Kadena can do industrial amounts of storage on a blockchain, and that it could involve things like ZK technology too, not so much for the privacy, but for the fact that ZK can give you really tight guarantees about the kinds of compute and storage you've done, and then just get a nice succinct record on chain. So this is some exciting new developments coming in the future.
Right on. So maybe to take the question down below, Stuart, will the gas limit per block be raised anytime soon?
I think it will once we finish the current round of gas work. We'll start understanding. I don't know if it'll be raised, but certain things will be kind of better priced. And but right now, I think it's not. I think blocks are getting not even. I think the mempool problem is actually a bigger problem, because you see blocks getting filled, and then you see a block right after with hardly anything in it. So I think the first problem we have to solve is get that distribution.
Even distribution.
Yeah, get that distribution to be smooth. And then I think, because right now I think people are perceiving that the block limit is getting hit and DNA is doing extra work to try to make sure that their transactions get in when they think. And that, I think, is this mempool issue that we're working very hard on fixing to get that even distribution. And then at that point, some of this other gas work will come in, and we'll start knowing, if we'll be able to say with a lot more certainty if that block limit is truly safe to raise.
All right, we got a question from Johender for DNA. How much demand are you seeing for the service of certifying these real-life assets on the blockchain? How many projects have you certified so far, and what does the future demand look like?
So it's really early in the adoption stage. I think, like, in general, if you've looked at the blockchain, it started with cryptocurrencies, then the NFTs a couple of years ago, and now we're moving towards the more utility uses of blockchain. So it's really in its infancy. We've been kind of looking sort of longer term, so we're not trying to rush and just mint as many tokens as possible. We want to make sure that the base technology is good, and that we are doing the right steps in our evolution. So we haven't really minted so many tokens to start, but we're talking to a lot of different companies, and the next integration, we're talking about probably hundreds, if not thousands, of goods that are going to be tokenized. So, I think that scale is going to be a lot more exponential going forward. But we wanted to make sure that, we didn't run before we had the base technology at the level that we wanted. And I think, one of the campfires with Will and Stuart had a really good point. It's, when in Web 2, it's about go fast and break things. In Web 3, it's like building a supply chain. So you have to really think longer term, and you can't just go out and just mint, especially when you're talking about utility tokens and assets that are going to have a long shelf life.
Right on, right on. All right, let's see here. So we have a few more questions here. One question from Cloud. How much preparation did it take to successfully conduct the transaction of the document? Which organizations were involved? So this is referring back to the news item that we were discussing at the beginning.
It was probably the longest, just because of all the legal work that had to be done to understand the framework. There's a lot more constraints. As I said earlier, when you go and speak to a customer, they tell you clearly what they want, and then there's the limitations of the technology and what you can offer and what you can integrate. But in this case, you had to play within their sandbox. So the legal aspect took a lot. Then working with a consortium, working with Arkit, which is a very, very large company. They do military grade quantum encryption. They work with governments across the world, and then Imperial College, which is a university. So trying to integrate all that took longer than we expected. We had to push back our commercial development as a result of that, but it took probably from beginning to end 3 months.
Yeah, the legal part was definitely something that even myself had to look into, like read the law that was drafted, the framework that we were going to be working on. This is a framework that was developed by the UN, and so it took a lot of time to make sure that what we were doing was along the lines and actually help the consortium in a meaningful way.
And legalese is not that easy to read.
Yeah.
Right on. Thanks, gents. Quick question for Stuart from JC. Is there a timeline to fix the mempool?
Yesterday. No, it's actually a very, it's a much trickier problem than it might seem. Just because we don't, and it actually involves working closely with miners, but it also involves kind of simulations of the entire network. One of the things about Chainweb is there really isn't another network like it. And it's because of the probabilistic nature of the consensus across the chains. So we have to proceed very carefully. The system works right now in the sense that we aren't losing transactions. Believe it or not, that's possible. If you screw up a mempool, you can actually have it that in a reorg, transactions get dropped. And that's something that isn't broken. So this is one of these things where, like we're more transparent than most projects. We talk about the things that actually don't work perfectly in Kadena as opposed to pretending like everything is just hunky-dory all the time. But there's a reason why this problem hasn't just magically gone away, and that's because we have to step carefully. But the good news is that you probably noticed that Kadena has been growing a lot, and one of the things that we have stepped up in is in SRE. And now I forget what that stands for, but it's a site reliability engineer, and the idea is that actually getting engineers. Usually, you hire engineers to build products, new things. So the idea is actually getting to this idea that we have engineers who their whole job is to focus on reliability and simulations and improving performance. And so we're putting serious money at it. So I'm not going to say when it's going to show up. I can just say that we're actually investing in it. So this is not something that, this is something that we're actively working on.
Question from KRI 1980. Why was DNA and Kadena chosen for this cross-border e-trade transaction and not other blockchains?
I think the short answer to that was we were approached after the Sotheby's auction, and then obviously Kadena just offers a lot of features that were extremely attractive for this project: the extra security, the low gas fees, the environmental impact. So I don't think specifically they singled it out, but we have worked very, very hard to get in touch with people that can put us in contact with these kinds of projects. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without Kadena and without the technology. So I think it goes hand in hand.
Just to add a little bit to it, because this is again, this is a framework that the law was developed for international commerce. We just happen to be at the right in the right time.
Time.
Yeah. Thank you. But the idea is that any other company would have to do this side of the business that we did, and they can choose any blockchain for this. A government will in any country will be probably keen to use a different blockchain because that's part of like what they have built into law to use that blockchain. So what we did has to be or can be replicated by any other blockchains because that's required by law by this framework that was developed by the UN for it to be used. So it's not like from now on everything is going to be done for this type of shipping transactions only on Kadena, but we are making sure that that's going to be the case, that there is no other choice than the right choice.
And you don't want that anyways, right? I mean, you want people to succeed because you're offering a superior product. Because if it's just some law, well, that law could change.
Yeah.
Cool question from Kadena Ecosystem here. How does DNA Tech plan on using Kadena's multi-chain? Oh, I'm sorry. That was not the question I meant to hit. I hit one above. We already got to that one. Companies like Walmart are already using blockchain for tracking of goods. Do you see yourselves, DNA, being the guide to bring even more corps into blockchain and Kadena specifically?
Definitely. I think at the end of the day, this, as I said, we're just at the beginning of this next evolution. And when you think about the trends that are going on, circular economy, bigger secondary markets, more counterfeiting, more fraud out there. If you want to, I mean, Web 2 is a wild, wild west. If you're buying something online, you have no proof that anything is what it is, right? So what I think blockchain brings is the plumbing and the infrastructure you need to have a safe, secure, transparent world. So I think that, in 10 years' time, these technologies will be everywhere. It's also, supply chains are extremely dirty in the sense that you can't really tell the provenance. We work a lot with jewelers, and the big issue is that Russia is a big producer of diamonds. They all get sent from across the world into India, where most of them get cut. They will just pull them together, cut them, and then sell them into the market. And big jewelers specifically ask for non-Russian or non-child labor origins, and they can't guarantee that. So blockchain is a kind of technology that can fix that. And then in our world of the commodities as well, there's a lot of fraud that happens. So just from digitalization, they think that the saving is going to be 4 billion a year in just documentation. But on top of that, there's all the fraud that the insurance companies, the banks, and the lengthy processes that only lawyers win in those situations that are not very efficient. So I think that you're going to see a lot more adoption, and at the moment, a lot of what we're seeing is more news sound bits. I don't think that the adoption has fully happened at the moment, but I think we're well positioned to capture that.
One of the themes that we're really going to be hammering on when we launch our new website in the fall is this idea that both internet and crypto haven't really delivered on their promises, right? In the sense that we know that there's frustrating things about crypto. I mean, you don't have to go far to find that argument. But we also know, I think it was really interesting you brought up this idea that Web 2 is the wild, wild west for consumer products, because that's something that, is also true. There's so many things in Web 2 and internet that have not lived up to their promise, or quite the opposite, have gone in really, really negative directions, like so much surveillance, so much monopolization, and being able to capture entire markets and manipulate them because of the global reach of tech. So this is something where, the theme we're going to be hammering over and over again is that crypto has something to teach Web 2. But Web 2 has a lot to teach crypto about usability and about focusing on actually making people's lives better with things that aren't just about speculation, but actually deliver real value and really make things different for people. But then crypto has a lot to teach Web 2 about like how important decentralization is. And one of the things that I'll probably talk about on another campfire is when we start talking about WebAuthn and the very exciting work we're talking about bringing those standards onto our blockchain. It's how much they're not designed for crypto. They're really designed for like big companies, big organizations. And, so Satoshi's original vision, which was decentralization is how you radically make, stuff more available to the end user, is actually the right answer for Web 2. So, so the kinds of stuff you guys are doing, I think, is how Web 2 is going to grow up and start living up to the initial promise of the internet, which was supposed to make us freer, which was supposed to bring us together, and as opposed to what we're seeing today.
And I think it's a core value and philosophy at DNA that, we want to make it accessible. So when you start talking to corporates about blockchain, they do have this negative impression, and often it's quite complicated to get access to it. So that's, in the way that we build, we try to make it accessible that anybody who just has Web 2 experience can access it.
Amazing. So I see we have run a few minutes over here, but hopefully everyone's enjoying the discussion. Maybe I'll just ask our speakers to close with any parting thoughts, words of wisdom, or whatever comes into your mind before we say goodbye to everyone. Abraham, you're right on the top of my screen. I'm going to put you on the spot here first.
I mean, Kadena is the place to build, man. We are convinced about it, and we have it for the long haul. We actually are, again, like I said, we are on the drawing board. We are taking what we just learned from this pilot, and we're thinking big. We soon hope to make our team bigger. So, connect to our social channels, because we are going to be announcing at some point. We'll be looking for people. And to Kadena, thank you guys. We love what you guys have done, and we definitely look forward to what's coming next.
Right on. All right, Adam, I'm putting you up on next.
Okay, it's probably two things. The first thing is, we're very focused on our projects, but we really appreciate the love from the community, and we really appreciate any word of mouth and how you spread the love. So thank you for that. We're probably not the best on that aspect on the social. We'll try to do better. But definitely, like, we appreciate your support, and anywhere you can, get on the mountaintops and help spread the news. We really appreciate that. The second is, we're very grateful for Kadena and the support and the technology you give us that's enabled us to do what we've done. And, we really want to encourage others to build. So, because the more projects that build on Kadena, the better it is for us as well. And, there are potential synergies, like we spoke about Crank, but, we don't know what else is in the pipeline that, might be another very exciting technology that might be very additive to what we're doing. So we definitely encourage you, if you're looking at a project and you have a more medium, long-term vision, and you are not looking for the instant gratification eating that marshmallow, then we definitely encourage you to build on Kadena. And we're also happy to field any questions through our social or other channels, to help you make that decision. But yeah, it's great to see the community grow. It's great to see the support. Really appreciate it. And we have some more exciting news that we'll continue to release. But we like to kind of drip it out. So thank you everyone for the support, and thank you Tyler and Stuart for organizing. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Stuart, we'll give you the last word.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, DNA is just to be applauded for really doing something special. One of the things we weren't able to get to is, kind of a wild card question, which is that, one of the things we're going to be making huge investments in is zero knowledge ZK technology. And some of that stuff is going to be going right into the core of what PAC does. So that's just a teaser for a future campfire. But one of the things I want, we couldn't get to so many interesting topics. Like eventually, I'm sure GDPR is going to rear its ugly head and all those kinds of things. And that's where like having easy access to things like zero knowledge technology is going to be really game changing. So there's just so much going on at Kadena, and likewise, we're hiring too. We're in it to win it. And this fall, when the new website comes out, you're going to see that all the people believe in Kadena and have supported us all this long. Thank you, because we're going big, and it's going to be super exciting. And with partners like DNA, there's really no limit.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tyler.
Bye.